And so I'm on the radar seat for that mission.
A little more tense, that one?
That one got extremely tense. Our final ship on radar. And so I advised the pilot that this ship is about 20 miles off the coast of Hainan Island. Remember, 25 mile standoff?
Yeah.
And he says, well, we'll go ahead and take a look. And so we were going in. We get to the 25-mile arc, and my ECM scope lights up. And I know enough about ECM to say, this is not a good thing. That means that somebody is lighting us off. And instinctively, I'm thinking, we'll stay there. It's going to go away if they quit scanning us. The third thing is it's going to blow up in my face when the missile hits us. Tom Hopkins, currently flying with, as a crew member, I should say, as in Civil Air Patrol, Cessna aircraft, all volunteer force, auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force. We fly out of Spanish Fork. There's a whole bunch of squadrons throughout the whole state of Utah. And real quick, Civil Air Patrol was commissioned in 1941. A day which shall live in infamy. We were 2 days before it. And it was because the government is starting to shut down aviation to be able to control the airspace for protecting, because we knew things were happening. And so a couple of other folks went to the Congress and said, hey, let us fly for you guys. And now that would give us a chance. So they did anti-submarine off the coast, specifically the Atlantic Ocean, and they did surface surveillance and stuff, and eventually did, in fact, have a chance to engage a couple of German submarines.
Subs, yeah.
And so, we had an illustrious history of service in both search and rescue and also ground team efforts. We have a cadet program for ages 12 to 18, and then we also have aerospace education, which is an education outreach program, where they have training materials that are available to teachers and stuff like that. So it's a very involved program now, especially from what it started off to be.
Where'd you grow up? Where did that start?
Well, my background is aviation. I've been chewing on airplanes since I was a young little kid, because my dad was in Air Force. When the Air Force first started, they recruited him because he had flown as an enlisted pilot in the Himalaya Mountains for the Army Air Corps. And so when the Army Air Corps went away and the Air Force was commissioned, then they recruited him to come back in. And so he came back in and was a bomber pilot until his death in 1959. And he took a B-47 in at Goose Bay, Labrador on takeoff. It blew up one of the dual engine pods, and the airplane didn't have enough altitude to recover, and it took him in. Anyway.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 12 years old, living in Salida, Kansas, a beautiful place to grow up when you're 12 years old. I tell you what, it was out in the middle of the plains, and it was a small little town, and everybody knew you. Back in 59, but if you were walking downtown doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, you'd get scolded and even spanked back then. And then by the time you got home, your mom and dad knew about it, and you would get. Anyway, it was a beautiful town.
Did your dad talk about much of what he did in the military, or was he kind of the quiet guy?
He wouldn't talk. Well, I don't know if he didn't talk to us much about it because we were just too young to appreciate it. I surely wish I had spoken more to him about it. But when we would have squadron parties over at the house, we would, of course, we never did this. I will neither confirm nor deny that we would sneak down the hall and listen to the conversations that were going on. So every now and then we'd hear something. My dad would talk about flying the Himalaya Mountains and stuff like that. I've got a bunch of his letters now, so it all makes a whole lot more sense to me than it did back then. But
what did he fly? Tell me about the Himalayan stuff. Give me a little short thing.
They flew the old DC-3s, twin-engine, unarmed, non-pressurized airplanes. They would be flying at very high altitudes with these things, and they were dodging the Japanese Zeros, dodging the weather, dodging the mountains. It was very, very dangerous stuff, but I didn't have any idea back when I was listening to my dad that it was such a dangerous thing.
How many years did he do that that go on?
You remember the old Catch-22 movie where he talks about that you got to have so many hours of time before you get a furlough? Well, he would talk about how many hours he had left and how they kept changing the hours on him and stuff like that. But he did that for probably, I'm guessing, probably about a year and a half from the letters that I have he sent home and stuff. And he survived it. He talks about, going through people's thing to send home that didn't make it and stuff like that in his letters. He never talked about any of that stuff. But one of the jokes that he would always say was the DC-3 was not a very efficient aircraft. They still have C-3s flying and the R-4Ds, and they're all basically the same airframe, just different models, British models, our models, stuff like that. But he would say that they would burn more fuel in the airplane carrying the fuel that they were carrying for the operations that were taking place out of China. But he was there basically to support the Chinese while they were fighting against the Japanese trying to survive.
So did you grow up? You probably grew up wanting to be a pilot then from your time you were a kid.
Absolutely, yeah. That was the thing to do. I've got an expo that I did about how much I wanted to be a pilot, just like my dad. But I never felt like I could. You just can't be as good as your dad. Your dad is awesome, especially when you're 12 years old and younger. And he could do no wrong.
When your dad, you caught news of the accident at that age, how did that affect you at that point?
We had been in the community for a long time.
Did you live on base?
Yeah, no. Well, we did when we first got there. We lived in base housing. They called it Indian Village. The big thing about that was there was no fences up at all these houses, just in a long row. And so if we went into our backyard, which was the backyard of the other houses on the opposite side of the little gully there, we could put our little chairs down and we could watch the drive-in movie, which was on the far side of the housing area. We couldn't hear anything, but we could watch the movies. And that was about the only thing I remember of Indian Village. And then from there, we moved into town, and Dad rented a house, and we lived at still there, 223 North Columbia in Salida, Kansas. And you can go to Google Maps and look it up, and there it is.
Wow.
It's still there, the same house. It hasn't changed hardly at all. And anyway, we had actually visited some other families that I remember. In one particular case, we visited a family whose father had been killed. And he had two daughters and his wife. And so we kind of went out in the yard and played with the daughters at the little park area and stuff like that. And they were pretty devastated. It was so when it happened to us, we're invincible, typical, preteen kind of attitude about life in general, but when it actually happened to us, then it was pretty devastating. And the big thing I remember, to my dying day, I will always remember my older brother. He was a lot older than I was. He was 14. He took the other three brothers that he has, and we met in the downstairs bedroom in the closet. And he says, "Okay, guys, this is how it's going to go down." And I said, "Not going to have any crying. We're not going to have any fussing." And says, "Mom needs our support." And we had Air Force people all over the house. And stuff. And so he took charge, and to this day, my older brother will call us every now and then and says, "How are you doing? What's going on?" Kind of get a feel for what's going on. But he's an ancient old guy now. He's about 83 and going to be 84 pretty quick and stuff. So anyway,
well, let's jump forward a little bit and tell me about how did you end up in Vietnam? How did you end up in the Navy?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. I'm a draft dodger. I lost my student deferment because I had to drop a class and drop below the minimum number of credits that you could have. So I knew I was going to get drafted. And so when my cousin...
And this is where you're living at this point?
I was living in Sacramento, California at that time. And we had lived there for many years. But I was in college, and I knew that I was going to get a draft notice because the draft was.
What year is this?
This would have been in 1966.
Oh, so
actually, it was 65 in particular. I enlisted in the Navy in 1966.
Okay.
And the reason I enlisted in the Navy is because I went to the Air Force, and the Air Force says, "Sorry, guy, everybody is volunteering to join the Air Force because that's the best way to go." And so I thought about the Navy, and I talked to the Navy, but hadn't really done anything about it until my cousin called me up and said, "Hey, can you give me a lift downtown? I'm going to the Navy recruiters." And so my older brother had joined the Navy for basically the same reason. He couldn't fly because of his eyes. He had issues with his eyes. And so he went to the Navy. And so I didn't have any qualms about going to enlist in the Navy, but I just hadn't taken the action yet. I'd been lazy.
When you were taking him, did you think you were going to enlist? Or was that, it must have been in your...
I was a chauffeur.
Okay.
It started off, but when I got there, of course, the recruiters, talked to me about a program that the Air Force or the Navy had, where with a 2-year college degree, and I was about halfway through to get my degree. They said with a 2-year college degree, you can become a pilot, or start pilot training anyway. And so I says, "Where do I sign?" So sign me up. I'm ready to go. And so I actually signed up with my cousin. We did duty where we were supposed to be assigned together. As it turns out, when we went for our physicals, we got split up, and I started right away, and I got delayed for 90 days, and he went in right away.
Oh, back up a little bit. When you went home.
Oh, yeah. Now, that was a whole different story. So I said, "Hi, Mom. How are you doing?" I signed up for the Navy, and you could hear the explosion. I think it was registered on the Richter scale. It was, she was not happy, and she said, "I'm going downtown, and I'm going to tell him, no, you're not, go ahead and start the war, keep the war going without me. He's not going to be there." And I said, no, don't do that. That's not going to happen. I'm going to go. And I did.
And you're 20? How old are you?
I was actually 20. It was in 1966. I was 20 when I enlisted, and I went to boot camp in San Diego. No longer a boot camp down there.
What was that like?
Oh, that was, actually, I figured I had made a very wise choice. When I get up in the morning and it's still dark outside, and I'm looking at this blurry-eyed guy in the mirror, and I'm shaving his face, and I can hear the Marines out there. They're already marching and drilling. I said, wise choice. And so, yeah, boot camp was actually not too bad. Had some really fun experiences there. So it turned out to be not too bad for us. It was San Diego, June. Sun is terrible. It's very hot and humid. I got a picture of me in my boot camp uniform with my nose all completely blistered and scabbed over and stuff. It was really, really not good.
When you say you had fun experiences there?
Well, because I was the shortest guy in the company, they put me in as what they call the right guide. So I'm holding the company flag, and I'm in the very front of the group. And when they lined everybody up, they always started with the tallest and put them in the front, and then the smallest guys in the back. So I got to be in the very front. But the purpose of that was because my short pace, the rest of the guys would be out walking my short pace, and so they had to stay behind me. And so that was the purpose of putting the shortest guy in the very front. So I got to be the right guy, and that was pretty good. I was also the male petty officer. So every day I get to leave and go to the post office and pick up the mail and bring it in. So I was a pretty popular guy, usually. Sometimes there was a couple of guys that weren't very happy when they didn't get what they wanted. The Dear John letters were pretty good. Anyway, but I was a pretty popular guy. And the other thing that was kind of fun, because I was a short, scrawny, skinny guy, we got to do the boat races. That was one of the competitions we did at boot camp. And we had whaleboats that we rowed. And because I was a short, scrawny guy, I was the coxswain in the back. So I didn't have to pump the oars, but I was calling the cadence and I was holding the rudder.
How many guys would be in a boat?
We had about 12 guys in that boat, 6 on each side. And it wasn't the long, skinny boats. These were big whaleboats, like you would see on the side of a rescue ship or something. And they were heavy, and propelling them was a pretty big deal. But we, our company, managed to win the race. We had 5 other companies that we were competing with. and we won the race, pretty close race, but we won it, and I was really proud of my guys. They were pretty excited. But what we had done, my tactic was, we don't know exactly where the line, because there's no line in the water, and so all you can see is where the line is on the right hand side, but it's depend on perspective exactly where you were. So we pumped those oars hard and heavy all the way past the finish line, and we were still going just to make sure. And there's a bridge up here. If you make contact with the bridge, you're disqualified. So I had briefed my guys in advance, and it says, when I give you the call, everybody on the starboard side drop your oars into the water, and everybody on the right side pull your oars up, so that I can spin this bugger around. And we did. We spun around on a dime, came up with about 8 cents change, and put back around. But my company commander afterwards, as he was watching out there, says, "I thought for sure you were going for the bridge." But we made it okay. And we were also going to do a salute as we passed the judges as we went by. I opted not to do that. I decided at the last minute, that's a little tacky. and so we just rode back to the thing. And again, my company commander says, "I just knew you were going to do something and get disqualified." Anyway, so boot camp for me, yeah, it was. I got my share of being chewed out and verbally abused, and the hours were long, and the classes that you had to go to were pretty intense. But beyond that, it was actually not a bad time. I kind of enjoyed it all in all. Don't tell anybody I said that. That's it.
At this point, when you went in, did you know much about the Vietnam War? Or was that just kind of because you were so young? Was it just kind of going on in the background? Again,
in the 60s, things were heated up pretty good. Again, we had the race relations issues and all this. So it's kind of like it is on TV now. It's pretty intense. But it was starting to gear up. The protests were starting to gear up, and things were looking bad. But I was college, and I had other important interests like girlfriends and classwork and stuff like that. So I wasn't paying an awful lot of attention. But I quite, like everybody else, we figured that we're going to go straight out of boot camp, straight to Vietnam, either shipboard and I would much rather have been on shipboard looking at Vietnam rather than being on the ground. But although there was plenty of people out there on the ground from the Navy as well. And so I was hoping above hope that I wouldn't go, but that was...
You knew that was kind of...
Yeah. So when at the end of boot camp we got our orders, I was quite surprised that I went to the hot and heavy world of Kingsville, Texas. The fun capital of the world. Kingsville is out in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
What's the nearest city to Kings?
Well, actually, Corpus Christi was the nearest city, but it was a good bus ride away to get to it. And we would go there every now and then, again, for church activities and stuff like that. We would go there. But Kingsville, Texas, one side of the city was the air base, and the other side of the city was a college. And there the twain should meet. If the Navy guys went over to the college side of town, you could get in trouble. And vice versa, if the college guys came over on the Navy side, there could be issues.
So were they going to have you fly, or what were you going to do there?
Oh, no. Kingsville, Texas, quite interestingly enough, is Advanced Jet Training Command for, it was, I guess it's shut down now, but was the Advanced Jet Training Command for the Navy. So this would be where the Navy pilots who had gone through all of their pilot training, this would be the last place they would go, where the key thing was combat tactics with jet aircraft. And we were flying the old F-9s, Korean War vintage jets.
Tell me about that plane.
Oh, those were buckets of bolts. They were junk aircraft, but they were certainly expendable. But the purpose of it was just to go out and do carrier training and get qualified to land aboard the aircraft carriers. That was their big push. And of course, there was other jet tactics and stuff like that. But the F-9 was a fast aircraft, but it was by today's standards was really awkward to fly. It was old. It was
2 guys in that plane or 1?
Normally it's a 1-seater. They did make 2-seaters because a training command, you had to have an instructor in the back seat of the aircraft. So the pilot would be up front, the student would be up front, and the pilot would be in the back, or instructor in the back.
Was that a main plane for the Navy during the Korean War? Was it that old?
It was an aircraft used by Navy during Vietnam, by Korea, but they had other aircraft by then. So the F-9 was actually obsolete then. And so when it picked up the role of training aircraft, it was ancient, old. And as a matter of fact, shortly after I left the squadron, they got rid of the F-9s and brought in A-4s to do advanced jet training command. So,
and what were you doing there?
I was working on the flight line as a plane captain. My job was to marshal the aircraft when they came in and when they went out, and then do pre-flights of the aircraft. So if they said that airplane's assigned to go at 8 o'clock in the morning, we'd be there. We'd go around, make sure it had fuel and had everything it needed to have. And then when the pilot manned the aircraft, we'd be there to start them up and to disconnect the power units when they got started. And then F-9s, again, fun aircraft to be around because it was just like I said, a piece of junk. But when they fired it up, one of the things the plane captain had to do was to actually go stand in back of the airplane and make sure there was no residual fuel in the tail end of this aircraft, because when it was starting, it would be pumping a lot of fuel. And so some of that fuel would collect in the tail of the aircraft. And when the engine started, of course, all this fuel would ignite, and now we got this big fire in the back of the airplane. One story. Hold
on. When you're back there, you got an extinguisher?
Oh, yeah, you'd have the extinguisher in hand, but you wouldn't actually, if the airplane hadn't started yet, you would go bang on the side of the airplane, get the pilot's attention, and you'd say, cut, shut it off. And if he did, that would be great. If he shut it off after it had ignited, then the fuel would be burning back there, and there's nothing to blow it out. So you'd have to use the extinguisher to shut it to blow it out. So there's these boxes between all the airplanes, and there was about 3 fire extinguishers in each one of those boxes. It was, and I had one situation where I'm instructing a kid to be a plane captain, and he's told the airplane to go ahead and start. And the pilots, you can hear zap, zap, zap of the igniters to start this thing, and it's not starting. And he's got fuel actually running out the back of the tail. And so as soon as I see that, I'm running over the guy and to tell the plane captain to tell him to stop there, to stop what he's doing. And it doesn't get to him in time, and so it ignites. So now all this fuel in the back of the engine is now burning, plus the fuel that was on the ground is on fire. So I got this huge fire going right there. And so I grabbed a CO2 cartridge because that's what you're supposed to do. The other guy grabbed what we call a purple K, which is a dry chemical powder. And I got to be an air rescue firefighter later after I retired out of the military, and so I know the big difference between the two of them. But he got to it before I did. And so we're both basically squirting. I'm squirting CO2 up into the engine, and he's squirting the purple K all over the back of the engine. Well, it's a salt-based product, and so all this metal has just been contaminated with all this salt stuff. And so we got a big chewing out by the maintenance officer, because now he's got to pull the engine out of here, and he's got to, that's a big pain in the butt. But anyway, that was
if you put the fire out, if you just put it out and will the plane just restart again? Yeah,
if I had put it out with CO2,
it would have been fine.
We'd had to let it sit for a while to evaporate all the fuel. And by the way, this is all JP4, which is basically kerosene, and it doesn't evaporate
very good.
So if the engine because the engine had started, what he should have done at that time, but there was so much fuel, he should have got the pilot's attention and gave him 3-finger twist, saying, go to military power. Full power on this thing, and what you're going to do is you're going to blow it out from the inside. So you're going to burn off all that extra fuel and burn it out. Well, we didn't get to him in time, and he shut it off. So it was a big...
Sounds like when you're starting a bad gas grill for your barbecue and it doesn't light, but the gas is collecting.
And you keep adding more fuel to it, and then it finally goes, and the neighbors are wondering what all this black smoke is about. Yeah, that's kind of what we had going.
And how long are you at that base?
I was there for almost 2 years, not quite.
Did you enjoy that?
Actually, it was really great. When I first checked into the squadron, the administrative officer asked me, please, oh, please, would I please volunteer to be a personnelman? And because he needed personnelmen in the shop. And I'm looking outside, looking at the airplanes, and I said, no, I want to be out there where the airplanes are. And he says, but it rains out there, and there's wind, and it's smoke, and it's terrible, and the sun bakes you. And I says, yeah, it'll be fun. and I did. I enjoyed it out there. It was kind of fun.
Were you kind of surprised you weren't in Vietnam at that point?
I was very surprised when I saw my orders. Says, what in the world is Kingsville, Texas? Never heard of that, And but I was glad I didn't have to go to Vietnam, or I'd get assigned to a ship even. So that was good. I was on the land, and
so and what happened after there?
I extended my enlistment and volunteered to go to electronics school because I had gotten assigned off of the flight line. I got assigned to the radio shop, and so I got to work on the airplanes and stuff like that. Interestingly enough, the class that I dropped when I lost my deferment was electricity, electrical class. I had to drop that class and it dropped me below my deferment. So that's what caused me to have to go. And they finally put me in the electric shop. But in order to become qualified to be an electronics technician in the Navy with the NAT, I said, you go to school, it'll be a lot easier if you do that. So I volunteered to extend for 6 more months. They sent me to Memphis, Tennessee, where I went to electronics school. Well, Memphis, Tennessee was okay. I didn't have any problems with Memphis. But the school environment was just boring. And it was pretty intense. And courses were pretty heavy duty. But there was an opportunity to go through advanced training, which means you could go through, instead of 6 weeks, you go through in 4 weeks. And it was kind of a self-paced thing. And so I volunteered to do that and got out of there in 4 weeks. Went to the advanced electronics part of it, where they talk to you about radio electronics and we build a heterodyne receiver, which the old timers will know what that is. But these new kids don't have any idea what that's all about. But we did that. And then when we finally graduated from there, is when I finally got my first squadron. They sent me to sea duty, and I went to VS 37 in San Diego. And they were flying the old S-2 aircrafts, which again were Korean War vintage aircraft, but not quite so old as the old F-9s.
And they were flying off the carrier.
Yeah, that was a carrier-based aircraft. And so luckily enough, the squadron was at shore at the time. And so I got to get into some training and learned how to become a flight crewman. And
describe that for me. What are you doing? What's your job?
Well, on board the S-2 was a 4-man crew, the pilot, co-pilot up front. Behind the pilot was a non-acoustic operator whose job was to run the radar, the electronic countermeasures. We had a mad boom that stuck out the back that was like it was a magnetic detector. So when you flew on top of a ship or a submarine, you'd get this magnetic sweep.
So essentially, you guys were out searching for submarines.
Yeah. Our main job was anti-submarine warfare, ASW, and we were to detect, locate, and track and destroy, if necessary, submarines.
A pilot, co-pilot, you said
and a non-acoustic operator. I was the acoustic operator when I first got there. My job was to listen to the acoustic signatures we would get from the sonobuoys we would drop in the water. They would be hydrophones that would extend down into the water, and then they'd send a signal up to the sonobuoy itself, and then it would radio that back to us in the airplane. So we would monitor the acoustic signature, what was going on. That was my job. We had passive acoustic where we just listened. We had active acoustic where we would actually send out a ping, and then, or more appropriately for the S-2 days, we would drop little depth bombs, little depth charges. They looked like little bombs. They're about this big. And when they hit the water, they would arm, and then they'd sink to a certain depth, and then they would explode. And that would send out a explosion signal, and then we could echo range the echoes would come back and see how far away we were from a contact.
Are you doing all that with like paper and pencil in the?
Yeah,
I mean, you're calculating.
Yeah,
you have a slide rule, or?
Well, yeah, actually did. It was a round slide rule we would use for calculating the acoustic signature. You know, we could determine how many blades on a propeller. We could tell how fast the propeller was spinning around, so we could tell how fast he was moving. we get a little bit of aspect, ratio in terms of are we listening to the front of the submarine or the back of the submarine, that kind of stuff.
Is there any, I know it's what you're describing is technical. Did they talk about tactics of the Russians at this point? Because that's really who the other guys putting subs out there,
yeah,
right?
The tactics were pretty much the same as you're used to watching the old submarine movies. They went deep, and they know where the water sounds will transmit the worst for us detecting them. And so they would try to get into where the shadow zones were and stuff like that. And basically, that's the tactic for submarines that has always been. You make yourself a small little dot in a very big ocean. And so you try to get away from us people that are detecting you, tracking you, and doing what we can to keep tracking of you. It's kind of fun. Had a specific, we're tracking a nuclear submarine and an S-2, which was very hard to do because they weren't designed for nuclears. They were designed for diesel submarines. But we have 3 airplanes that are on station, and we got this U.S. nuclear submarine. And so we fly down the course that we think he's headed. If we get a magnetic sweep on it, we know we're on top of him. We drop a smoke bomb in the water, and all it does is just floats and it generates a smoke. And so the next airplane is going to come down the same track that we're on. If he doesn't get a signal, it means the submarine's turned. And so the other airplane is going to offset either to the left or to the right. And so the 3 of us, we're tracking the submarine. He can't get away from us because no matter where he turns or how deep he goes, we're still able to track him. And we attack a submarine, even a friendly submarine, by dropping 3 of those depth charges we talked about. So if we drop 3 of them, that means that's an attack. And so during an exercise, there's a referee, if you will, on board the submarine. And they tell them, okay, well, the attack was over here. It was so far away, and it was at this range and bearing. So he would use whatever this little chart he's got to see, was that a legitimate attack? Was it a kill? Was it or not a kill? And so we attacked this guy. We must have attacked him probably about 6 times. And it kept coming. He wouldn't acknowledge. He would acknowledge an attack as a kill by shooting up a smoke. And if you sent up this green smoke, that meant that he'd have been hit. And he was out of the game. We had to go play with somebody else for a while. Well, we'd attacked this guy 6 times. We were pretty confident, yeah, this guy's dead. No question about it. But he wouldn't acknowledge it. So one of our guys took 3 of the depth charges, duct-taped them together, and threw them out the hatch in his attack. So we dropped one. It was basically one explosion, but it's 3 of them at once. So it's a pretty intense thing. Well, it evidently hit right next to the submarine and caused some kind of damage. He had to come to the surface. A nuclear submarine coming to the surface is a cardinal no-no. And they just don't do that. So when he came to the surface, there was steam coming out of the con tower. He was really ticked off. And we got in big trouble for that. I said, you just don't do that. That's not fair. Anyway, but we got him. We got a confirmed kill on him. No, we were 16 miles over here. You guys didn't get us. So.
Was that exciting doing that?
Oh, love that thing. That
must have been a rush.
Oh yeah, it's the ultimate video game. Because then you get the results but again, it is a big ocean. And if you're by yourself out there in an S-2, especially trying to track a diesel submarine, even if you get contact on him, by the time you get contact close enough that you know where he is or where he's going, then it's time to get relieved and head to somebody else will get to play the game.
Describe the S-2. Who made that?
S-2 it's a Grumman built aircraft. It's called the Tracker. If you want to look that up on the internet, just go Grumman Tracker. And you can see it's a twin-engine aircraft. It's propeller-driven. It's got big, huge rotary engines on them, 18 cylinders. And noisy as all get out. The submarine can hear you when you go over, because the thing is just making so much noise going over. And but it was a very reliable aircraft because when the pilot went full power, you got torque right now. You could climb out of any situation that you're in. And a pretty fast aircraft for a propeller-driven aircraft. And we had about a 6-hour duration. We could fly for 6 hours, no problem at all.
Is that the one that had the sniffer on it, or did they all have that?
No, that one had the sniffer. That again was a diesel.
Tell me what that is.
A sniffer. Well, first off, when I was in the airplane, it was obsolete and we didn't use it anymore. But the concept of a sniffer was very simply that you suck a certain amount of air in. You're flying pretty low, but you suck in some air, and then your equipment analyzes it looking for hydrocarbons from a diesel engine, and then it exhausts that air and takes another sample out. It keeps going like that. Rattles like a big banshee. You could even feel it in the back seat of the airplane, although the equipment is actually in the nose of the aircraft. They put this thing in the nose of the aircraft, which is right underneath the pilot's seat. And the stall warning for an S-2 was a rudder shaker. And rather than having a horn blow like we have on our Cessna aircraft today, it actually shook the rudders to let you know that you were stalling. So the equipment was obsolete. Like I said, we didn't use it anymore because, first off, diesel submarines were much more efficient than they used to be. And it was such a timely process to track this thing. You had to fly down his path till you finally came up with him sitting on the surface. So it would be used in conjunction with radar. But what we used it for more frequently is on a 6-hour flight. It gets pretty boring, especially in the middle of the night. And so you're flying a surface patrol mission, looking for ships and rigging ships and stuff like that. But at 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning, it gets pretty quiet, and there's no talking on the intercom, and you're getting pretty drowsy. So you reach up and you slip on this sniffer equipment, which shakes the floor underneath the pilots, which shakes the rudders, and so immediately he pushes the nose over, thinking he's stalling. And then you get to hear some of those words that the Navy is famous for, as he refers derogatorily to your ancestry and all kinds of other stuff.
So when you're flying around San Diego.
We were home based out of San Diego, Naval North Island.
Yeah.
There's of course S-2 squadrons out of Washington and East Coast as well. So yeah, and they all deployed on aircraft carriers.
How long did you do that?
I did that for actually about 2 years, and then the Navy gave me a program. They sent me to Escondido, California, where I actually got to go to college to finish up my associate's degree. Well, I'm about halfway through my associate's degree, so I figured if they send me, they'll send me for a year. But they sent me for 2 years to get a 2-year degree. So I was averaging about 16 units a semester, including the summer semesters. So when I graduated with an associate's degree in aviation and aeronautics, management, actually. And also I got 2 certificates of completion for airport management and air traffic control and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I just packed in as much as I could. And before I graduated, I took a course in real estate so I could sell my house. And anyway, it was fun. The downside of it was when I got there, the day I got there, I knew the day I was going to be leaving because they gave me 2 years. Exactly. So I knew at the end of the semester I was going to get a set of orders when I graduated and be gone. But unfortunately, I didn't get my orders until 10 days before I transferred. And I had figured for sure. I got family to take care of. So I went down to San Diego, bought a house down there. And we had just cleared escrow on the house. And I get my orders and it said Naval Air Station, Moffett Field out of San Jose, California. And so now I got a house in San Diego. I just sold my house in Escondido, and now I got to move to Moffett Field, and I didn't know anything about it. So I did a very, very bad thing. I called the guy that issues my orders, my Navy detailer, Marty Colbreth, senior chief that he is. I remember him very well. I met him a couple times after that, and I just chewed him out one side and another. You just don't tick off the guy that writes your orders. That's not a wise thing to do. But I says, Marty, you can't do this to me. He says, I got 10 days to get up there, get a house, get settled, and everything. He said, sorry, this is something we got to fill these orders. And says, you either take these or you take what else I can give you. And I caught the drift of that. So went home, talked to the wife, and says, let's go ahead and take these. And so we called him back and say, okay, Marty, I'll accept them. So it was a set of sea duty orders because I'd been on shore duty for 2 years. So it was to finish up my sea duty. And I was stationed at Moffett Field, at what they call a mobile ASCAC, which was a debriefing center for flight crews. But this debriefing center, and that's where I was actually assigned to, was the ASCAC right there at Moffett Field. So I was debriefing the P3 flight crews. P3s are the Lockheed Electra's anti-submarine warfare crews that go out in the middle of the ocean to track submarines. And so I was debriefing them while I was waiting for this mobile ASCAC to get shipped from Japan to Moffett Field. And when it showed up, it's a 18-wheel trailer, just a truck trailer. And then there's this huge monster generator that goes with it. And it was designed back in the early S2 days. It was an ancient, old piece of equipment. So my job as the senior guy in charge was to bring it up to date, spend some money, get this thing working so that we could use it. And the idea was that they would load it on board like a C-5 aircraft for the Air Force and fly it to wherever they needed it to be, where you could have a mobile debriefing station. So we could go to Japan, we could go to Cambodia, we could go to wherever. Never went anywhere. Spent all this money getting this thing fixed up. And then they finally decided, you know what? This isn't sea duty orders. The guy has a gun. I spent 10 days in Adak, Alaska. That was my deployment. And so they said, this isn't sea duty. We're going to change this to shore duty orders. So I had to transfer. And so they transferred me from there back down to San Diego again to go to training so that I could go into the S-3, which was a replacement to the old S-2. S-3 was a fantastic platform. It was completely computer driven. One of my jobs during the pre-flight of the aircraft was to carry this cassette. When we think of cassettes, we think of those little, this was a big box, a huge box. And it had all the programming we need to do navigation, to go to where we're going to go, all of the weather and acoustic information we needed. And it would program our computer on board the airplane to be prepared to do all that stuff. And then the computer would basically do everything. We would tell the computer what we wanted it to do. It would do everything. From the back seat of the aircraft, I was the only enlisted guy on the airplane. I was acoustic operator. And I'm sitting behind the pilot quite a ways. The guy behind me or on to the right of me is the tactical coordinator. He's the guy that runs the mission. And then the co-pilot is actually the non-acoustic operator. He's got the radar and all that sort of stuff up there. And then the pilot, of course, is the safety of flight guy. But from my seat, I can tell the computer, I want to drop a sonobuoy at this exact location. And I want to drop it from an altitude of 5,000 feet. I want to be heading this, 330, and at this airspeed. And the computer would say, okay. And
what year was this?
I got there in 1975, and I was there for 2 years. And I was actually stationed. I did the training in San Diego, and then I went from San Diego to Cecil Field, Florida, which was outside of Jacksonville, and we flew the S-3s there. And my squadron at this time was actually out to sea in the Mediterranean. So I dropped my family off. We bought a house, dropped my family off, got my household shipment, unpacked my stuff, and loaded my sea bag up, and had to go to Milwaukee to pick up a military flight that was going to take me to the Mediterranean. I had 5 days to do all of that. That was a marathon. Yeah. And again, I told the guys, this is December. I got there on December 2nd. And I said, I got 5 days to get up here to get this military flight. Says, what's going to happen? I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to the squadron. They're going to pull into port for Christmas vacation. And we're going to sit there. So how about giving me another week to get my family situated? They said, well, we'll get to the squadron. We'll get back to you, let you know. They never did. So in 5 days, I had to be up there. But the good Lord helped us out here. We found a house. We bought the house. It cleared escrow right away. My household goods happened to be sitting there waiting for us.
Wow.
And so we got them. We got the company to bring them out. And you can imagine the unpacking was not a meticulous unpacking.
Right.
It was a throwing things. And I finally got my sea bag packed and got on the road. And we got there. Traffic was terrible because of Christmas. Everybody's trying to get home from the States or get things. So
you're saying at the airport or at the
when we finally landed in the Mediterranean.
Okay, where did you land?
We landed in Naples.
Okay,
Naples, Italy, and the airport was just jam packed with people. And so I was a first class petty officer at the time, so I figured myself pretty senior. So I tried to get everybody that was going out to the ship at one spot and get them organized and got everything put together. And they were going to send a cod out to pick us up to send us to the ship. Well, the cod couldn't get there, and so we had to spend the night. That was a big nightmare, getting all these guys berthed in different places and then get them back the next day. The cod finally got there. It was broken. We had to sit there for almost dark, not quite. And then my first arrested landing on board the aircraft carrier in the Kennedy was on this cod. And so
how was that?
That was an interesting thing because I got I got over 100 arrested landings, almost 200 arrested landings. So I'm used to arrested landings, but that's in the S2s and S3s. And now I'm sitting, or S2s, I should say. Now I'm sitting in backwards in this cod with all these people, and it was a different experience. And I couldn't see outside at all, so you didn't know where you were, what was going on. And then finally, all of a sudden, it's this big jerk as we stopped. Luckily enough, we made it the first trap, so it was okay. But
what was that aircraft carrier like?
The Kennedy. Oh, every time. Well, I've been on board the Hornet. Was my very first aircraft carrier. It was an old Essex class, rust bucket, and then when on the second tour, I was on the Ticonderoga, and that was a little bit bigger, but still not much. But the layout is completely different. So what you do is you get your sea bag and you load. Or we flew aboard, so it was a little different. But you follow the guys down to your berthing space, find a bunk, put your gear on the bunk that identifies this is mine. Don't touch this bunk.
How do you know it just doesn't have any gear on it?
First come, first serve. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, my very first deployment, I saw a bunk that looked like it was pretty much unoccupied, so I dropped my sea bag on it. And this huge big guy comes and says, "That's my bunk, boy." And I says, "Oh, excuse me." And so I ended up going to the top bunk. Short guy always gets the top bunk. You know how that works, And so it turned out to be actually a good deal because on board the ship, the top bunk actually has more space because you got these huge I-beams for support and all that's free space up there. So you get to...
How many? 3?
There was 5 bunks.
Oh my gosh!
On the Hornet, there was 5 of them. So, and I had to climb up to get in there. After a while, you get hold of the I-beams and you learn how to just pull yourself up and just swing in. It's just, you do that. On board the Ticonderoga, again, I had the top bunk because I learned my lesson. But unfortunately, on board the Ticonderoga, I was right underneath the flight deck. And right where the airplanes land. And so during flight operations, when they were recovering aircraft, not only did the airplanes banging on the deck above you was a bit distracting, but the arresting cable for the arresting gear actually ran through the back of our compartment. Yeah. And so when it spooled out, when the airplane grabbed that wire, then that was pretty loud. But again, that's like everything else. You just kind of learn to adapt to it. And so, yeah, okay, they're arresting there. You sleep through it. So
the Kennedy was a lot nicer?
Kennedy was a lot bigger in terms of finding places was really a nightmare. You find out where your bunk is, that's number one. You find out where the chow hall is, that's number 2. And then how to get from one to the other. And then the flight line and the briefing room and all this sort of stuff. You learn all of that. But the Kennedy was spread out pretty big. It was a much bigger aircraft carrier. And the operations were a lot different. And
you were going to be on the S3 on there.
I was an S3 crewman, yeah. So I'm the only enlisted guy.
Did you go out the next day? When was your first mission on there?
Actually, yeah. I landed on the cod and I actually flew that next morning on board there. So that was my first S3 catapult shot. Now, catapult shots are a little different too. The Hornet was a hydraulic catapult. So they build up all the pressure that you need in a hydraulic system. And then when they tap the deck and say you're off, it smacks you with everything that it's got, and then you kind of gradually slow down as you get towards the end. And it's a perceivable deceleration, but you're still accelerating. You don't accelerate it quite so fast. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
The physics people out there would know how to say that better than me. But it was a big kick in the teeth right off the bat. It was definitely an e-ticket ride. When I went to Ticonderoga was a steam cat. In a steam catapult, it hit you with the gusto at the beginning, but then it continually accelerated as you went down. So it set you back in your seat, and then you stayed back in your seat until you finally jerked at the end of it when I'll let go of you, and off you went. Which one was better? I don't know. We took a cat shot with a hydraulic cat once that was so strong that it actually rippled the rudder when the tail end of the airplane hit the deck, and it shuttled down there. When we got back and looked at it, it would actually ripple the rudder. So yeah, those were pretty intense. Steam cats were much more mellow, and yeah, so little deal. Kennedy was a steam cat.
And how often were you going up? Every day almost?
Well, it's kind of a unique situation here. One of the reasons I got orders to Cecil Field in this particular squadron, and they wouldn't let me stay home to take care of the family, was because the squadron had a drug test, and almost half of the flight crewmen flunked the drug test. And so that means they couldn't fly anymore. So they were hurting. When I got there, I was the senior guy there. I was a first-class petty officer, but I was the senior guy there. The chief petty officer in charge of the shop had been busted. And the other chief that was a flight crewman, he was actually working somewhere else. So, we were half the flight crews that we needed. We needed to have at least 12 flight crewmen. We were down to 6. And so that meant that the flight crewman, the enlisted guy on the airplane, you can't fly without him because he's got to be there. Plus, you've got ejection seats, and you can't fly. You have to have an equal balance in the 2 seats in the back. So you have to have somebody back there. So they were flying these guys around the clock with no break. So they would only fly for about 2.5, 3 hours, but they'd be down for about 2 or 3 hours. Then they'd go back up again, and they would be doing that around the clock. And so when I got there and saw what was going on, I said, this is absolutely not acceptable. And so they wanted to send me to the debriefing center to brief and debrief the flight crews when they were coming in. And so I went to this XO and I said, no. I said, you guys need the flight crew here. So let's do this. You let me assign the flight crewmen to the crews. They're not flying with the crews now. Normally they would be assigned a specific crew, and that crew would go together. But they weren't flying with crews. So I says, you write the flight schedule. You let me put the flight crewmen in so I can give them as much of a break as I can. And then I'll take myself and the 2 other second class petty officers, and we will do the briefing and debriefing out of thing on our downtime. And anyway, so the XO thought that was okay. Operations officer thought it was a great idea. And so we did that. And until we finally got some more flight crewmen in where we could actually start skipping it up and actually signing people to crews and start doing crew calls again. So it was a unique situation. I didn't realize until I got there what was going on. And I didn't make friends with the flight crew specifically. When I got there, we had a room. Our flight crew shop was actually a void on the ship. It wasn't a working space at all. It was just a void. And they'd put a desk in there, and that was it. And you could get 2 people, maybe 3 people in there at one time. And so that's where I wrote the flight schedule. But they had plastered these steel walls, gray steel walls, with some really, really tough pornographic pictures. And so I went through immediately, took them all down. And so for my first briefing that I had with all of the crews together finally, which was probably like 4 days into the operations, I called all the flight crewmen together and I said, hey, I don't know who these pictures belong to, but if you want them, they're right over there. You can take them. If they're still there by the end of the day, they're going in the trash. And nobody claimed anything, but they weren't happy. They thought I was going to be a real hard buster and that stuff. But I earned my keep. I finally got respect of them by recognizing that, hey, these guys got need. I got to give them some rack time. Let them go gets them down.
Decompress, yeah.
Yeah. And so we were able to pull that off. And plus, I got some real major kudos because I'd been briefing and debriefing the P3 community at Moffett Field. And so I learned how to do a reconstructive mission. You go back and you replay all of the tapes and you see what did they have on your big gear where you can sit there, and stand around and take a break when you need to and get up and stuff. And you could look at the grams and you could see what was going on. You could listen to it if you wanted to. And so we were kind of a backup to the flight crew. And we had a big major exercise where we had 2 nuclears and 1 diesel submarine that we played games with. They were trying to sink the fleet, and we were trying to protect the fleet. And so we would do the replays. If the flight crew said they had a contact, and they did, we gave them kudos for detecting a great job, fantastic thing. Let the operations officer know that these guys are really doing good. If they missed a contact, that we'd bring them in. And we'd say, hey, you missed this one here. You probably weren't watching this sonobuoy at this time, but you had contact at this point. And so we did training and we did that. Plus we saved the tapes of that when they had contact so that there was a contractor on board who was the electronics guys that were building the package and doing the computer stuff. And he thought this was a treasure chest. Because we saved the hard copy grams that we replayed. We saved the cassette tapes that had the data on it. We plotted all of the sonobuoys that we charted, and we showed where the contact was and where the submarines went. And so they could reconstruct all that. So I got this nice letter of appreciation and stuff from the contractors.
How long were you over there doing that?
We were in the middle of the deployment when I joined them, so I was only there for about 3 months. And then we came back stateside, and we got to do training. We got to get back into speed and build up our complement of flight crewmen, and then we went out for an exercise. And the old Navy guys will know this. You go out for an exercise, and one of the things the ship has to do is all of the drills. They do all the drills, man overboard. They do fire. And the bosun's mate always comes on the intercom system, blowing his horn, and says, "This is a drill. This is a drill. Fire. We got to fire in this compartment. Man your fire station, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Well, I'm teaching a Sunday school class in the chapel, and the one MC goes off, and the boat says, "Fire. We got to fire." And we're all laughing. Says, boat screwed up. He didn't say this is a drill. This is a drill. And then he repeats and he says, "This is not a drill. This is not a drill. We got to fire." And so we immediately, everybody's running, going to their damage control stations. It turns out the USS John F. Kennedy had a backfire. One of his engines backfired right through the exhaust stack, and it rippled rudders, it rippled deck plates, it blew a bunch of the stack. It was a big problem, and we didn't know anything about it. We were on the other side of the ship, didn't hear a thing. But anyway, so we pulled back into port, canceled operations, pulled back into port, and then we went back to Cecil Field, and the ship actually sailed up to Virginia to dry dock to have them rebuild the system here. So we normally would be back at the beach for about a year, and then we'd go back out to sea again. And so we were there for almost a year and a half. So I made one more deployment to the Mediterranean. I was in the middle of that when they shipped me out, and I had to go to Naples and pick up a flight to come back to the States again.
Oh wow!
But that was
they never shipped you to Vietnam.
I went to Vietnam in the S-2 squadrons, but I stayed off the coast. And our job...
What year was that?
That would have been in 67, 68, 69. And our job was to do mostly maritime patrol off the coast. And so we would have 3 flights that would be doing maritime patrol off these specific areas they had designated. And then they had a submarine down at the southern end of the Gulf of Tonkin. And I assume that was because if they needed a submarine, they had one available. but we would send one airplane down there and go play.
You're saying when you're saying they, you mean the Vietnamese,
the God powers, whoever's deploying the fleets.
No, for America.
Yeah, for America.
American sub.
Yeah, so if they needed a submarine to protect the fleet that's there, we had an ASW task group there. They would have at least one task group there and stuff. So the submarine's job was to do protection of the fleet if they were called upon to do so.
Were they mostly, what was on their aircraft carrier? Was it F-4s or?
Our aircraft carrier?
Yeah, what did you have?
The Hornet?
Yeah.
The Hornet actually had, we had F-15, well, that's Ticonderoga. So we had F-15s on the Ticonderoga. But on the Hornet, we had, I'm trying to think, we had A6s, we had A7s, and then we had, I guess we had F-14s too, or F-15s, I'm sorry, F-15 for a while. 15s? I'm sure I got the number right. Tom Cruise's aircraft.
Yeah.
15.
It's a F-14, isn't it?
14s?
I think so. With the wing that would sweep back?
We'll let them, yeah. Well, all the airplanes had wings that sweep back to their carrier.
What, I mean that would move?
Yeah.
Oh, did they all? Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was one of our S2s, the wings folded over the top of the airplane.
What did you see? You being out in the ocean, though, you probably didn't see that much in Vietnam.
Oh, I saw Vietnam every day.
Tell me about that.
On the radar.
On the radar.
Yeah, there was a standoff because the North Vietnamese had missiles that would shoot 20 miles.
Okay.
So we had to stand off the coast 20 miles. On the Chinese side of the Gulf of Tonkin, they had missiles that would shoot 25 miles. So we had to stand off 25 miles for that. But on your maritime patrol, one of your patrol zones would take you about 20 miles off the coast, and then you go down the coast. And your job basically is to look for ships and surface traffic. Again, our old weather radar wasn't good for much other than that. A little sea story time. One of the things you would do in the northern sector was you would go down the coast, and your electronic countermeasures would pick up radar sites. And it would tell that you're being painted by a radar site, and so you'd plot that on.
This is when you're in the airplane.
Yeah, the airplanes.
Yeah.
We're just flying down 25 miles off the coast looking for surface ships.
Yeah,
nothing to do. So you'd plot this radar site and exactly where it was located, and then the next time you come around, you'd get close. You point your radar right at that site. And so your antenna's not moving at all. It's just pointing directly at that. You turn this weather radar. It's all it is just a weather radar, but it had a lot of power. You turn it on high range, and you'd wait. And sure enough, that radar'd come on, and he'd start painting you again. And you'd see a sweep. You get a sweep pattern. He's coming ready now. Yep, he's coming ready now. So when the antenna was coming around and panning on you, you'd turn your radar on. And his radar would go away. You'd literally burn the crystals out of his radar sight because of our power that we were kicking back at him.
Wow.
And we did that for the first deployment I was there. That was really a lot of fun. And they would be down. The radar would be down for a couple of days or maybe even longer. Then towards the end of the deployment, they were coming right back on again pretty quick because they were getting replacement parts for it. Well, we finally get this memo while we were back on the beach. We got a memo from Joint Chiefs of Staff or somebody. I don't know what it was. And they said, don't do that anymore. They're getting too many replacement parts too fast. This is a good tactic to use if we need to jam their radar. So they told us to knock it off. So we had to quit playing that game. That was no fun at all.
Any accidents or anything you saw that would kind of, any scary moments, anything that sticks out to you from that time?
I had a really good time. When we were flying S2s, S2 was a real straightforward aircraft, a lot of moving parts, but it was a straightforward aircraft. They'd been flying for decades, and so it was a pretty safe airplane. We had one major incident in the S2 community. One of our airplanes had a bad lineup, and the pilot was correcting from too far to the right. He was trying to correct to the center line. The LSO told him to cut the engine and land. He did, which he shouldn't have done. And the airplane kept going to the left and went off the side of the ship. It did get a grab at wire, but unfortunately he took it off the side of the ship. So now I've got two of the enlisted guys in the back of the airplane and then the co-pilot and co-pilot that are being drugged backwards in the water by the cable attached to the ship. The left wing is banging against the side of the ship, and of course the engines have both quit. But the acoustic operator who sits behind the co-pilot, we used to do drills all the time in hangar bay. The safety officer would hold up a sign and it'll say ditch, or it'll say fire, or it'll say whatever. And then the crew had to react to that, which would include actually jumping out of the main hatch of the aircraft if there was a veil out, and then somebody would catch you and help you down. So those were the drills. But Lenhart, who I always considered a good friend of mine, he actually worked in the radio communication shop for the squadron. He always bragged that if that airplane ever ditched in the water, he's going to be the first one out of the airplane. He used to brag about that. The other gentleman who I remember correctly, and I'm not sure I do, his name was Tucker. He worked as a maintenance guy on board the airplane. He was an electronics guy. And his hatch, the two in the back were closed when they landed. The pilot and co-pilot, their hatches are open so that they don't have to screw around with it. That's how they get out. But the two on the back are still closed. Tucker had a handle that he could pull, and it would open his hatch so that he could get out and get on top of the aircraft to do the pre-flight on top of the airplane. The hatch above Lenhart was sealed. He had to actually blow that one to get out of the airplane. Well, the pilot says during this debrief, he said that the airplane finally bounced off of the cable and settled in the water. And so he unhooks his harnesses, does what he's supposed to do, stands up because he wants to make sure that the guys in the back at least got their hatches open. And he turns around and there's Lenhart sitting on top of the airplane. He's ready to go. And so he told him to go and get off the airplane. And he did. He went in the water. Lenhart was the only one of them that made it all four of them made it out, by the way. The co-pilot, they never saw get out of the airplane, and the pilot thought for sure they'd lost his co-pilot till the helicopter picked him up. But the co-pilot did the thing he's supposed to do, just followed all the procedures he was supposed to do. And it's dark, by the way, it's nighttime. And so he grabs this and he grabs this. So he's oriented all the time, knows exactly where he is. He stands up and literally rolls right straight out of the airplane into the water and inflates his life vest, and the helicopter comes and gets him. Lenhart was the only one. The airplane, when it went off the side of the ship, took 2 racks of survival vests and life rafts with it. And so these life rafts hit that salt water, inflated. So now we got these life rafts floating around out there. Lenhart was the only one that made it to it. And he was really, really, really ticked off. When I got a chance to talk to him, he was telling me how mad he was. During survival training, they give you all these things to play with, the flares and the smokes and the shark repellents and all that sort of stuff that's there. When he crawled into the life raft was upside down and all the stuff was underneath and he couldn't get to any of it. So he was pretty mad. But we got him off. Lenhart didn't do very well. We had a lot of trouble getting him back in the airplane.
He was just skittish.
Just scared the bejeepers out of him. And I always felt pretty bad for Lenhart. We got Tucker back in the airplane right away. And as a matter of fact, I flew with him. And he did okay. And a pilot and co-pilot did the same thing, basically got in the air right away.
How often were you, was it night? It was about 50-50, night versus day?
Oh, we flew around the clock. So, yeah. And
and you were going up every day, basically?
Pretty much every day. Now, actually, as it turns out, when I was on board the Hornet with this schedule, we had 20 hours of work, which included 8 hours of flight time. 6 hours of flight time, an hour brief before, an hour brief after, or debrief after. So a total of 8 hours. And then the rest of the 12 hours, we were pre-flighting aircraft, loading sonobuoys on board the airplane, doing the things we were supposed to do. And so we had a 20-hour day, and then we were off for 10 hours. So we were working a 30-hour schedule. So you're constantly rotating. So today you're flying daytime, tomorrow you're flying nighttime, and in the morning. And
so when the aircraft carrier group is out there, is there always someone looking for subs in the air?
We were doing maritime patrol.
Maritime. Yeah.
So we had 4 airplanes in the air all the time.
All the time.
And,
wow.
And so 3 of them they would be all geared up for anti-submarine, but they'd be doing surface search and stuff. and then one would actually go down and play with the submarine down there. So that was in the late 60s and stuff now. And the rest of the Ticonderoga schedule was more, as again, on board the ship, there's not much to do.
Yeah.
And so keeping people busy was better.
How prevalent was the drug scene on the boat? Did you see it a lot, or was it more kind of under the surface?
I didn't see it, but then again, I wasn't in that culture.
Right.
I joined the Latter-day Saint Church right after I got to VT-22 in Kingsville, Texas.
Yeah.
So I didn't, like I said, I think that on my 21st birthday, the line guys on the squadron took me out for a big party, a birthday party out in town. And the reason they took me is because they knew I was LDS and wasn't going to drink. So they had to have one sober guy at the party.
To drive you back, everybody back.
So I'm driving all these drunks back home. That was my big happy birthday. But they did give me a cake, though, so I can't complain.
When you joined originally, you weren't planning on staying in the Navy, were you?
No. My plan was to get in and get out. My older brother joined the Navy again, the draft dodger, and he got in. And as a matter of fact, he was stationed at Cecil Field, quite curiously enough, before I got there. And he did his 4-year tour and got out. And he got out just before I went in. Then my 2 younger brothers, again, both draft dodgers, although the draft went away just before right after my youngest brother joined. They all joined the Navy, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of my father. Anyway, but we all joined the Navy just because it was kind of tradition, but they all got in, got out. My younger brother was stationed on board an oiler, the AOE-2 Camden, and he was not happy at all. He didn't like it. My younger brother was kind of rebellious and did get along well with the people he was on. So we ended up applying for and got permission to have brother duty. So he transferred to my squadron, my VS squadron, VS-37, and he wasn't in the flight crewman at all, and he was a ground pounder. And so they put him immediately in the first lieutenant's division, which is the guys that clean the barracks and the guys that work in the mess decks and things like that. And so the second day he's there in the squadron, and we're at San Diego, we're on shore duty. And the second day that we're there, his chief sends him to the maintenance shop to go get a bucket of prop wash. Well, bucket of prop wash is one of those fictitious things. There is no such thing. Prop wash is actually the air that blows off of the propellers. So they sent him to go get a bucket of prop wash. Well, he's a pretty smart kid. He knows he's been conned, but he's got to play the game because he's a junior enlisted guy. So he goes to the line and he says to the maintenance, to the line chief, he says, I got sent over here. I need a bucket of prop wash. And so the chief assigns him to somebody and they take him off and they say, we're all out of prop wash. You're going to have to go over to AMD, is what was called as maintenance for the whole squadrons around. And so he went off to the AMD and says, I'm here for a bucket of prop wash. And they says, oh, no, you got to go over here to that thing. So he went back to the barracks and stayed there for the rest of the day. And then when he went to the work the next day, the chief was all ticked off. I said, where's my bucket of prop wash? He says, well, I walked all around. As I went here and I went there, and there and there and there, went all these places. And nobody had any, chief. Sorry. And then again, they harassed him all the time.
What made you stay in the Navy?
Unlike my brothers, even my youngest brother, by the way, a little sea story time, my youngest brother became a radioman and was assigned to the Ticonderoga. So while I'm deployed on board the Ticonderoga, my brother was there. And so I got to be the old salty dog. This is my second deployment on the Tyco. So I know my way around. I know how to get there. So I'm taking my younger brother around to show him everything. And fun story. I'm the salty dog. I know everything. So I step out into the catwalk because the catwalk is the side of the ship where it's just grates and there's nothing between you and 90 feet down to the water. And so I step out there and turn to the left to go forward so he can step out and follow me. And the ship took a roll to the starboard side, and the elevator part of the elevator hit the water, and the spray of water comes up, and I am completely drenched by phosphorescent water, meaning it's really bright and white because it's been agitated by the catwalk and stuff. And so I'm soaking wet, drenched, and I turn around to see how my brother fared, and he's not there. And I'm thinking to myself, oh no, I lost my brother. What am I going to tell my mom now? First day on board the ship. Well, it wasn't his first day. It was his first couple of days on board the ship, and I lost him. And so I immediately head back to the hatch and turn, and there he is standing in the hatch. He's dry as a bone.
He didn't follow you out there?
He saw the water coming. So anyway, but the irony is that when I was on board the Ticonderoga at that time on deployment, my first child was born, and my brother got the radio communication from the naval station in San Diego saying, "Oh, by the way, Petty Officer Hopkins is the father of a daughter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And she had some medical conditions, so she had to stay in the hospital and stuff like that. And I finally got to see the official note, but my brother got a copy of it first and he gave it to me. And the executive officer of the squadron finally brought me in and gave me the official copy. But my brother got to tell me about my first child. That was kind of fun. We had a good time. He was on board the ship for quite a while. He got to participate in Apollo recoveries and stuff like that. The Tycho did. But all three of them got out because it wasn't fulfilling to them.
And you were in for 20?
I only did 20 years and 2 days. So, but I had a great time. Chasing submarines is the ultimate video game. Big ocean, small ship, and really sophisticated equipment stuff towards the end, and it got to be a lot of fun.
How would you know to engage the summer if you found one there? You just watching them at that point? Because your thing was to protect the carrier.
Yeah. So if we generate a contact, then I report. It's kind of like the movies. I report a contact. The pilot phones it in, or the co-pilot phones it into the ship. The ship then tells the tactical command people, this airplane out here has got a contact. We've designated it number 026 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they report it and stuff. And so that everybody knows, all the ships around know that we've generated a contact, whether it's legitimate or not, we don't know at this time until I confirm it. And then I can finally say, I've absolutely got a contact and this is approximately where he is. We're laying sonobuoys in the water now to find out exactly where he is. And then we do employ the tactics. And when we finally identify this is exactly where he is, then we have to report that and say what permission to attack him. And assuming he's a friendly, just a U.S. sub playing a game with us. And so they would give us permission to go ahead and lay an attack. And so then, again, back in the S-3 days, when the computer was doing all this stuff, it's reporting what we're doing to the ship by way of computer-to-computer communication. So they can see what we're doing. As well as the fact that we highlight and, oh, by the way, we've got something going on. So in the S2 days, it was all voice stuff. And
the life on the ship, on the Kennedy, how many guys were on there?
Oh, I think there was about a half a gazillion. There was a lot of them. Chow line could get pretty long sometimes. But
was there only one eating place in there?
Oh, no. On Kennedy, you had a snack area where you could go and buy snacks. They had a forward galley. They had a rear galley. I got to be a chief petty officer when I was on board, actually the Kennedy. And so the chiefs had their own mess. And the officers would beg you to take them to the chief's mess because they had to be escorted to the chief's mess.
Why is that?
We had pretty good chow. The chiefs on board the ship, they get money to buy rations for, like the regular chow hall does. And then we had a dues that we paid to the chief's mess. So we would have steaks, we'd have lobsters, we had pretty high on the cup. We ate pretty well, at least on the Kennedy. I don't know about the rest of it because I wasn't a chief then. But the officers would be begging us to come because it was better chow than what they had their officers' mess, which ate separately. But there was about two chow halls in the officers' mess and then the chief's mess.
Like earlier on the other ships, what was the food situation like?
kind of funny stuff. I can't eat chipped beef on toast without being on a metal tray anymore. It just doesn't seem right. The other ships all had metal trays. They finally went to plastic later. But the old metal tin trays, and
how big would that, like the eating area? Is it huge?
No, actually, it's not very big. And
is it running all day?
No, they run a breakfast and then they shut down, clean up, and set up, and then they'd run a lunch and then do the same thing, and then a dinner, and then there would be a midnight rations time when they'd feed the midnight crews that were working overnight. Now on board, especially in the S2s, when you're up for 6 hours, you'd take a box lunch with you. And so the chow hall would build a box lunch, and it would basically be leftovers or whatever it was from lunch or dinner or whatever. Some of those things could be pretty gross. They were pretty nasty. So I went to operations and I says, how about if for our flight, for our wing, we would have 4 airplanes, 4 crews. And I says, how about if I go down and I'll make the box lunch for us? And so it was much more basic. We would do like peanut butter and jelly. We'd do
something that wouldn't get gross.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nasty stuff. And so everybody was pretty happy about it, except for one of the chiefs was not happy. And he always wanted an orange drink in his box lunch. And if he didn't get one, he'd really complain about it. They would have orange juice. They're small little cans. Orange juice, apple juice, and pineapple juice. Pineapple juice was lethal. I think they used it for corrosion control. You pour it on, and then they would just eat the corrosion right away. That was nasty. So you knew better than to eat that. The apple juice wasn't too bad. Orange juice I didn't like personally, but Chief almost had his name here. Just a second. It was Mitchell. Mitchell? No, I don't think. Anyway, it's pretty close to that. Anyway, he would always had to have an orange juice in his box lunch. So when we made the box lunch, we had to make sure he had a box lunch with an orange drink in it. And so one time we didn't have orange drink, so we made one without one. And he raised such a big pitch about it. The next time we made him a lunch, it had nothing but orange drink in it. We had a spare for him, but it had no, and so he picked up the nickname Chief Orange. And we called it Orange.
When you were in the planes, was there a bathroom on the plane or no? Was there a way to?
In the S2s, no. There's what they called the tube. It had a funnel in the back, and you urinated into the funnel.
Yeah.
And the joke there was that, remember, we're harassing the pilot with the sniffer and getting his attention. Well, you had to get permission to get out of your seat. So when you got out of your seat, they knew where you were going. And so he'd wait for 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato. And then while you were doing your business back there, he'd reach up there and open the front hatch. Well, that created reverse flow of air. And so whatever you put in the tube was coming out at you.
Oh, geez.
So that was his way of getting back at us. Anyway, but you kind of expected it. And when you felt that pressure difference, you'd point the tube somewhere else.
I don't think we've talked about, tell me the story of the guy that had to go around, what did you say, 6 times, 8 times? Tell me that story.
Well, to appreciate that story, you'd have to understand it's an S2 crew of 4. The pilot is the safety officer of the squadron, Lieutenant Commander Olmsted, and I had a tremendous amount of respect for him. As a matter of fact, he was the one that pinned my wings on me when I finally earned my wings. He was a great guy. The co-pilot was, I won't give his name, but he was an admiral's son. And so he was privileged, and everybody kind of milked him through. He was a lousy, lousy pilot, really bad. And whenever he was flying, those of us in the back seat were always a little bit on edge. One night, this is a night flight, we're coming in to land. We've been done. Our 6-hour flight is over. It's our turn to land. And this Lieutenant JG is the pilot, and our safety officer is the co-pilot. And we come in for an approach, and we get a wave off. The first one was a wave off. The second time we come around, and I don't remember the sequence out anymore, but we ended up making 8 approaches that night. And halfway through, the pilot says, let's climb out, and you take the pilot seat, and you take the trap. And Lieutenant Commander Olmsted said, no, Vic, this is your flight. You'll take it. And so Turner in the back seat and I are both waving our hands and jumping up and down in our seats saying, "No, let me take the next flight. I'll take the next flight." Can't be worse than what he's doing to us. We, the irony and a little side story is this flight took place probably about 2 weeks after the airplane went over the side of the ship. So we're a little tense in the back. And so anyway, bottom line is that we finally go around. We bolt her, which is where your hook doesn't catch a cable. We overshoot the cables. We take a wave off or two. And so on the 8th approach, we finally come around and he gets a trap and we stop. And I'm looking at Tucker and I'm saying, we're both wiping our brow and breathing a sigh of relief. And we probably haven't took a breath since the third or fourth trap. Anyway, that was a night. The end of that story was that when we came back home off deployment, the Lieutenant JG was seabagging and went to the front gate. He was out. They kicked him out. So we got a new co-pilot, which was better. But one of the interesting thing was, and I don't think I've said this, but Lieutenant Commander Olmsted being the safety officer, that's why they put him in this flight crew, so that he could keep an eye on him. So I went to Commander Olmsted and I said, "Why am I in the crew? Is there something wrong with me?" And he just says, "Tom, you're a hopeless case. We just put you in the back seat. We'll just leave you." But he had a lot of respect for me. And my radar operator, my regular radar operator, Mike Dunnigan was his name, a young lad from Alabama, I think he was. When we had a real serious radar mission, they would put me in the radar seat. Mike would take the acoustic seat. Mike didn't know how to turn on the acoustic gear. But when we had a real serious mission, and I wasn't trained on radar, it was all self-trained just by crawling in the seat and doing stuff. And so that's why I happened to be in the seat when we were actually looking for that Russian trawler I was telling you about. A Russian trawler who was not trawling for fish. He was a spy ship tracing us around, and he had left the area. And so they sent us out to make sure he cleared the area. And so I'm on the radar seat for that mission.
A little more tense, that one?
What's that?
You were a little more tense in the airplane?
That one got extremely tense. I found a ship on radar, and so we were tracking inbound to it. And so I advised the pilot that this ship was about 20 miles off the coast of Hainan Island. Remember, 25 miles standoff?
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, we'll go ahead and take a look." And so we were going in, and I'm giving him range and course and stuff like that. And we hit 25-mile arc, and we still couldn't see it because it was all hazy out. We get to the 25-mile arc, and my ECM scope lights up. And I know enough about ECM to say this is not a good thing. ECM being electronic countermeasures, that means that somebody is lighting us off. And so instinctively, I reach up and I turn on the recorder to record what's going on here, and that was a good thing. So I'm telling the pilot, "Yeah, I got a fire control lock on."
That means somebody's tracking you.
Somebody
and locked onto you,
either with a missile fire control or a radar fire control lock on. And he said to me, I remember Olmsted said to me, "Tell me what it does." And instinctively, I'm thinking, well, it's only going to do one of two things. It's going to stay there. There's not a third thing. The second thing it's going to do is make it go away. They quit scanning us. The third thing is it's going to blow up in my face when the missile hits us. So I said, "What do you want me to say? I don't know." So I'm watching it, and we're still going inbound, and I'm giving him mile ranges, 19 miles, 18 miles. And we finally got almost on top of this stupid thing before you could see it. And I got a second fire control lockout. So now I got 2 lock-ons. And I advised him of that as well. And he says, "Roger that." And shortly after that, he says, "That's not our contact. That's a surface ship." So he said, "Everybody hold on." And what he did basically is he kicked that huge rudder we got in the back because of these radial engines. He kicked that rudder, dropped that wing, and we literally dropped out of the sky. I mean, we dropped out of the sky. and and he recovered from that descent so low that the propellers are actually kicking moisture up off the water, and we are just booking it back out to that 25-mile arc. We lost the radar lock-ons, and so they went back to a surface search lock-on. They're trying to find us, in other words. And but we just literally dropped off of their radar. I'm sure we put the fear of God into my hope anyway, but sure got my attention. And so I'm watching that, and I'm giving him updates and giving him range and stuff off the island. And when we finally passed the 25-mile arc, we started climbing back up again. That was a pretty intense one. I got back to the ship, and during the debrief, I brought in the tapes and stuff, and they replayed the tapes, the guys that knew what was going on and whatnot. And he plotted our course and our position and everything, found out that what we were doing by flying into the ship, we were actually on a vector straight into a big base that they had out there. And so it probably put them on alert, and they may have even launched an alert aircraft against us for all I know. But again, an S-2 is not a very fast aircraft, and we certainly weren't making a lot of speed. So they probably didn't figure we were worth launching a missile against us. We got closer and then just shoot us out of the sky. And anyway, but they said, yeah, they had an altitude fire control lock, so they knew our course, our speed, our altitude, and exactly what we were doing.
If from that range they fire a missile, how long before it comes at you? Is it minutes?
Yeah. Well, again, this was back in the 60s. So,
yeah.
Probably a couple minutes. Yeah, they could have shot us down in a couple of minutes. Not long before that, they did shoot down an A4 that had gotten into the 25-mile arc. Yeah, they actually got into like.
Was that off your ship?
No, it was off of one of the attack carriers.
Okay.
The guy got confused at his navigation, and then he got they picked him up on his emergency radio in the water, but they never got him. Either the Tricoms got him first or the Sharks did, one of the two.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah, at least that's the story that I heard.
So when you get back to the ship, that was daytime. Was that day?
That was daytime.
Daytime, you get back, you jacked up, or you exhausted
I was pretty spent. That was a pretty intense flight. Again, we probably were airborne, I'm guessing. I'd have to go back and look at my logbook. But we were probably in the air for a good 6 hours.
Wow.
And stuff. And then, so yeah, it was.
Do you ever have any mechanical problems?
Well, when we got the S2, we had one other approach that was kind of a knee-jerker. One of the things in the old S2s with those big old radial engines, you had to recycle the pitch on your prop and your throttle settings to be able to blow out some of the carbon. It was a thing that the pilots did on a regular basis. The regular basis was probably about every half an hour or so.
Okay.
And so the pilot had gone through this process, and when he was advancing the throttle back forward, there's a series of pops. Goes pop, 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 pop. And I'm looking at Dunnigan was I think Dunnigan was with us. Anyway, I'm looking at him. He's looking at me, and what's this coming from? Don't know what's going on. It stopped, and then it started up again, and then it stopped, and the pilot asked us to check the engines, and I'm looking out my side. I don't see anything. Mike looks out his window, and there's a stream of oil coming out of the nacelle. He says it's coming out at probably about 3 or 4 inches before the wind stream picks it up and blows it back. What had happened was when he recycled the engines, one of the pistons stuck, and when the propeller came up, it hit the piston and punched a hole at the top of the piston. Now, every time the piston comes forward, it's pressurizing the crankcase, which is, of course, exhausting the oil outside of the crankcase, which is out the event. And so we're thinking, oh, cool, this is cool. So the pilot immediately declares an emergency and is going to head back to the ship. And this is out of cycle. There's recovery cycles, launch cycles, recovery cycles, launch cycles. This is out of cycle, so he's calling for a ready deck. Ready deck is a big thing. That means clear the deck. I'm coming in. I'm making an approach. I'm getting in as quick as I can. And so we're saying, hey, it's pretty cool. We got an emergency approach. It's going to be fine. And the pilot says, you guys get your parachutes. I said, what? do what? The airplane is still chugging? We're doing fine. I said, we don't want to do it. So we get in our parachutes, and we're sitting in the back here. And finally he says, if this engine goes, says, I'm not going to make a single engine approach to the carrier in this airplane with you guys in the back seat. Says, you guys are going to go. And then says they'll be there to get you. They'll know where you are. And says, but I'm not going to land with you guys there. So now this is no longer any fun. This is now a legitimate.
It's real.
Yeah, this
point.
is an adrenaline pumper. And so you're doing in your head. You're doing your review. There's things I have to do when I bail out, and before I go, and then bailing out is a sequence of events, and then going down, you cross your legs, and you're holding your risers to control your descent, and yada yada yada, doing all the things that they told you about back in survival school, and you're supposed to reach across and grab your harness. Sorry about that. Reach across, grab your harness, and you release your harnesses so that you're now just sitting in the straps. You're not actually attached. Sorry about that.
You're okay. You're fine.
Your tech crew in the back's going to go crazy
No.
banging them. And so now you're just holding on. And then when you finally get close to the water, and by close to the water, they mean when your life raft that's dangling down below you, which you were sitting on in the airplane, when it touches the water, then you let go of your straps and raise your hands high above your head so you fall out of your parachute. You don't want to hit the water with the parachute that's still attached, because when it hits the water, it's going to sink, and it's going to take you down with it. And so, that sinks pretty fast. And so that's the procedure. Hey, you're going through all of that in your mind.
That seems pretty complicated, honestly, when in the time of the emergency.
But again, remember, we were drilled on all those all the time. So it just kind of becomes a second nature thing. Hopefully, you get those tactical memory things that you've memorized. And so anyway, so I'm kind of reviewing all that in the back and seat of the airplane. And finally, we set up for the approach of the ship, and the engine is still
going,
and it's still pumping water or pumping oil. And the bottom line is we make an approach, we land, and we actually trap, and everything's cool. We grab a wire, and everything's cool. But I'm still on my parachute, and getting out of that seat. If we'd had to ditch, now that's a problem, because now I got to get out of my parachute in order to get out of my seat. Anyway, okay, so it was an adrenaline pumper. Maintenance came back to the ready room when we were back there debriefing, and he says, "Well, here's the situation, guys." Says you had pumped almost every ounce of oil out of that engine, and the hub of the propeller in front has a little cone in front of it. There's oil in there, and what happens when you cut the engine, that oil leaks back into the crankcase, and going back, then it feathers the props. We had drained the hubs, so that meant that hub had no oil in it. We were not going to be able to feather that propeller. The drag on that side would have cost us airspeed. If we'd have bolted, we'd have never made it. We'd have ditched.
Wow.
With me sitting in my parachute. It was bad. So the guy says, "You guys really got lucky." Lucky is because Mike Donegan and I had to go wipe the oil off of the off of the nacelle, but they had to replace the engine anyway, so it's not a big deal. So,
okay, how did it end in the Navy then?
Oh well, let me tell you for another. When I got to S3s, we're flying on ejection seats, and there was twice when I honestly expected to get ejected out of the aircraft. One of them, we were doing in-flight refueling, and I won't go into the details of it all, but the S3 is extremely difficult to refuel. Just by the design, and it's not good. And so I'm kind of leaning forward, looking out the front of the airplane to refuel that aircraft that we're making the approach to. And the co-pilot is actually he's the one that's doing the training, and he's trying to learn how to do this. And the pilot says, "You got to make a run on this basket that's hanging in front of it. Because if you don't, then by the time it gets to the wind stream carries it up and you don't catch it." So he tried a couple times, and he'd hit it a couple times, but it would blow off. So he finally gets back, and he accelerates and gets a good run going on this thing. And he finally snags the basket. This is really cool, but we're still accelerating forward. Not accelerating, but we're still closing on this A6. And as I'm looking forward, all I can see is A6 in the front canopy of the airplane. I mean, we were that close to that airplane. We were like right on top of it. So I just sat back, and the procedure for ejection is you kick your feet out, fold your hands in front of your thing, put your head back against the headrest, and when the ejection seat goes, you're gone.
Do you pull? Is it the thing you don't pull down from above?
I had.
Oh, you pull that
the
down.
Handles in front, and then there's handles on the seat too. Either one of them. I wasn't going to initiate ejection, but if that airplane, we were to hit that airplane, and those guys get disabled, I was ready to go. And we're.
Are you guys in the back talking to each other, or you're just doing that on your own?
No. We're not talking to it. But I was looking. But I just rolled back and says, "Yeah, okay, here we go." And another e-ticket ride. This is going to be fun. And as it turns out, the pilot, seeing the situation, pushed the nose over, and what happened was the probe that was attached to our refueling probe ripped off the front of our probe and broke off. But we cleared the A6. We didn't hit him. So when we made an approach, we couldn't bring the probe back in. It was bent, and we couldn't bring it in. So when we land and took the arresting gear, all the fuel that was in that tube rolled forward off the front of our aircraft. The fire team had to roll out there, and I'm sure somebody took a hit in their career for that one. But that was an e-ticket ride.
What was the second one? You said you were.
Yeah, there was another one, but it was. I'm trying to remember all the details of that one. It was again one of the deals where I just thought for sure we were going to get ejected. We got a cold catapult shot. And a cold cat is where you don't get enough steam to get to the right airspeed.
Is that because it didn't build up enough, or something malfunctioned along the way?
Something malfunctioned along the way, or they didn't put enough steam pressure in, or just whatever.
And I guess if you've done enough of those, you know when it's not right.
Oh, yeah, you know right off the bat. If you got a cold cat, it's very much noticeable.
And your chance of going in the water is pretty high.
Yeah, if you don't have the airspeed, then you're going in. I've seen a couple of videos of airplanes getting launched off and then settling in the water before.
Yeah.
I got a video. If you remind me, I'll leave it with you. It's an S-2 squadron, and it's on board the Hornet, but it's not, the Hornet, but it's not my squadron. And they launched this airplane in a real rough sea. And as the airplane's shuttling down the catapult, the nose of the ship dives down, and a big, huge wave comes up over the front of the ship, and the airplane flies right into it.
Oh, gosh.
I've got that video. It's really grainy and hard to see, but it's pretty. And the airplane recovers from it. You can see at the very last minute he's out there, and there's this huge blue streak coming from the cockpit as he takes off up there. Anyway, but this is a cold cat shot. So again, one of those things that you just roll back into the seat.
Nobody has to say anything. Everybody on board the plane knows.
Everybody knows. Yeah. Now, as it turns out, we did roll off the end of the ship and settled down. Got into the ground effect, but we had enough airspeed that we were able to recover. So we made it okay. Yeah, that was an e-ticket ride. So.
How was the leadership that you dealt with at your time in the Navy? That
was interesting because I was a flight crewman associated with the officers all of the time. My leadership was very respectful for what we did. They had a great appreciation for somebody who had really worked hard to accomplish the job that we had to do and contributed to the team effort. And so in my particular situation, even my fellow flight crewmen got a lot of respect, and they respected each other. I didn't have a lot of problems. I busted one kid for marijuana use. He had gone home on leave and had not made it back in time because he was doing drugs. He got kicked out. Anyway, but generally speaking, you screw up and you're gone. So the guys knew that. Plus there was a lot of camaraderie in the flight crew, and especially in S-3s, you're the only enlisted guy on the crew.
Yeah.
And so they rely very heavily on you to know exactly what you're doing and do it right, do it quickly, and make everybody, the job of the enlisted guy is to make the officers look good. And so if you're doing that, then things are pretty good. My brothers didn't have
like
that.
Yeah.
I had a situation where it really ticked me off. Remember in VS-32, we did the debriefing and the thing. We as a flight crewman did. So I got to sit in on the briefing of the commanding officer when we were of the ship while we were getting ready to go. And the lieutenant commander who was in charge of the debriefing center His crew had done a lot of work making charts and graphs and showing what he was going to do and how things were all worked out and stuff. And when he did the brief, it was all him. I did this. He gave no credit to his people, no credit. I had no respect for him. But the two guys that were working for him worked really hard, knew what they were doing. They treated us very well, left us alone so we could accomplish what we were accomplishing. And so a lot of respect for them. Like I said, I didn't have the same situation that my brothers did with the people that they had for leadership, their chief petty officers, and it was a lot different situation. And I made enlisted rate pretty quickly at my first enlistment, 4-year enlistment. I was a second-class petty officer already, and made first class shortly after that. So I was pretty up the food chain.
Were you sad to get out, or were you ready to get out?
No. That's an interesting situation. My dad was an Air Force pilot. He died, as we've discussed already, in the very last year of his military service.
Mm.
So the last year of my military service, I'm flying on a big airplane, the Lockheed Electra, the P-3 Orions, and I'm an acoustic operator, no windows, nothing. So when I get in the airplane and we're flying a mission, I start getting airsick. And I can't figure out, I got 1,000 hours of flight time, carrier landings and approaches and all this sort of stuff. But all of a sudden I'm getting airsick. And it's getting to be bad. So they finally sent me over to the physicians, and they looked at me over and says, there's nothing wrong with him. He's fine. So they sent me over to the shrink to talk to him. And he gives me this 35-page questionnaire. Have you ever this? And I'm going through this thing. And about halfway through this thing, I go into him and I says, I know what the problem is. Since I'm in the last year of my military service, my dad died in an airplane crash in the last year of his military service. This is psychologically screwing me up. And that's what's causing me to be all upset and churned and nervous. And I tried all kinds of ginger and stuff to calm the stomach. Couldn't get it. Said, it's psychological. It's purely psychological. He said, well, you got enough flight hours on the books. We can do one of two things. He says, we can either ground you or we just let you continue your last 6 months of service and not have to worry about flying anymore. And to this day, I regret that I chose to do that. I was an operations chief, so I basically ran the operations office. They sent me home to run the detachment at home while the squadron was still deployed. And what I would have liked to have done is to say, can I please, oh please, take a flight crew and one of your people and go to Goose Bay, Labrador, where my dad died, and just shoot approaches until I can get this out of my system, and then I'll come back and I'll be fine. And I didn't do that. Now, since then, by the way, after I retired, I went to work for a company that taught acoustic operators how to operate their equipment and how to detect submarines. And so as a result of that, I flew on a lot of P-3s and didn't have any problems after that at all. It was just strictly because of that psychological hangup. And so when they talk about PTSD or post-traumatic distress, I'm a firm believer in that. That's a legitimate thing. I used to think that, yeah, come on, guys, tough it up, suck it up, and get back to work. But that made a believer out of me, that this is a legitimate thing. And so I know I lost a lot of the respect of the operations officer, for example, of the squadron and stuff like that, and the executive officer of the squadron, because on the flight, he flew home because they get 1 week home while they're deployed. And he came in early, and we didn't know he was coming because the radios weren't working, and we weren't prepared for him. So he thought I was just screwing around, and legitimately so. We weren't screwing around, but I can see where he would certainly think that. Anyway, but that situation caused a lot of problems for me, and later. So and my last 6 months of my career, but. So you asked, was I sad to go? No, I was ready.
Yeah.
But after I went back and worked as an instructor for this group of people, I flew around a lot, and I recognized, I like flying. And that's one reason why when I finally came to Utah, I was an air rescue firefighter at Sacramento International Airport for about 13 years. And so I didn't get to fly much then. But when I got back here, I got to fly again. I said, this is cool. I'm enjoying this. And so when I retired from Utah Valley University, I had a chance to go to Civil Air Patrol, where I could still be on a flight crew. And as a matter of fact, I was working to be a pilot there for a while, and then I lost my medical because of heart condition. And so I says, well, I can still be a co-pilot, which we call a mission observer in Civil Air Patrol, and I get to be the mission commander, kind of like the guy that used to sit next to me. And that was fun. And I enjoyed that. And like I said, I've been doing that since about 2011 and stuff. And I'm still doing it now, although coming up on the 80th birthday, it's getting to be hard.
Well, you're a pretty spry 80-year-old.
Well, I'm learning very much that it's not the going down that's bad. It's the getting back up again now that hurts. And I can do anything I used to do when I was in my 30s, but it just takes me a whole lot longer to recover.
Just give me one good story from the Civil Patrol.
Oh, Civil Air Patrol?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't had any real emergencies with Civil Air Patrol. I had a couple times when we had to cancel a mission or something. They'd head back just to be safe. Civil Air Patrol, I'm finding, is very, very safety oriented. Our safety record is better than the military safety record, better than the commercial, although commercial safety record is actually very, very good. But because we're such a safety-minded crew, everybody is part of the crew, and anybody in the flight can say, knock it off, we're done. Let's back off and rethink this.
How often are you going up for those missions? How often are those missions happening generally?
Well, we try to do as many missions as we can. It's been a little more difficult here now that the budget's was a problem with money and stuff like that. But we just had a big exercise. We have warning areas out here where military go out from Hill Air Force Base and do their rockets and bombs and aerobatic stuff, and you don't want to be flying in there when they're doing that stuff. It's just it's not healthy, and so they close those down. And if some private pilot ventures into that area, then they got to send somebody out to go intercept him and get him out of the area. And so Civil Air Patrol just last weekend launched 3 airplanes, and we went into 3 different warning areas that were active with flights that were going on, and to test them and see what they would do. And also because there's procedures they're supposed to follow. And also then they launched the alert aircraft to go out and see, who is this and what are they doing? And then they vector, and there's a procedures that you're supposed to follow. They're supposed to try to get communications with them and stuff like that. And so they launched the F-16 and F-35s. So it's F-35s. Anyway, they launched aircraft out to intercept those 3 aircraft, and then we cleared the areas, and it came back, and then went back in as a group of 2 airplanes to see how they would handle that. Anyway, we fly as much as we can. The Civil Air Patrol gets money from the Air Force to maintain proficiency because there's things pilots have to do. They have to have at least 3 landings a month. They have to have 3 full stop landings.
And what planes are you flying?
Cessnas. They're all Cessna 182s, 172s, and they're equipped specifically with the radio equipment that we need, so we can do search and rescue and photographic work and the kind of stuff that we do. And so that's fun. They're a crew of 3, 4 if we can get them in there because the airplanes are pretty heavy. We can get a 4th person in there, they'll do that. And then so we have an observer. Observer doesn't have to know anything about flying at all. Not the observer, the scanner who sits behind the pilot.
Yeah.
And then the second scanner would be the same. We could have 2 scanners in the back that don't know a thing about flying airplanes or navigating airplanes, but their job is to look out the windows and make sure we stay safe.
Man, you've been flying a long time, then. You've been in planes a long, long time.
I got my private pilot's license in 1967. Again, I saved my nickels and dimes and started flying at a local flight club. Here I am at Advanced Jet Training Command with instructor pilots that are the best in the Navy's got, except for top flight, of course. And And here I am putzing around at this civilian airport with a flight instructor that doesn't give a flying bean about me. I'm going about once a week at the most to go get out and do
How much was it an hour back then?
Well, I was spending $22 an hour.
Oh my God.
And that included the instructor's fees, which was $10 an hour, and $12 for the airplane wet. That was for fuel and everything.
Wow.
$22 an hour. $22 an hour, guys. Yeah.
Those days are gone.
Yeah, they're not anymore. And now you can't fly, it costs you $180 an hour.
Yeah.
Helicopters are way more than that. Anyway, so yeah, I started doing that, but it was a hobby at the time, and I was playing it like a hobby, and I had fun and did some dumb things. And I'm a firm believer in that. My dad was my co-pilot. He was sitting behind me. I got marks on the back of my head where I spiritually get smacked. He said, "What were you thinking doing that, you stupid idiot?" And my first solo flight, do a full stop landing. The instructor gets out and says, "Take it around, do just once around the pattern." And so I took off, and I'm at it. The first thing that happens that's unusual is the airplane takes off long before I'm ready to pull the stick back because it's no weight over here. I'm 180 pounds lighter than I was before. And so the airplane almost started flying before I was ready for it to go. And then coming around as I got the runway off to my right or left side here, and I'm flying into it, ready to turn to final approach, and the co-pilot's window opens and just pops open. And all of a sudden the airplane is filled with air, of course, and it's noisy as all get out. We didn't have headphones back in those days. You had a speaker overhead, so engine noise, air noise, major distraction. So I says, well, I can continue trying to fly this, or I can close that window. So I said, I'm going to close the window. So I reach over and I grab it, pull it and lock it, and I come back. And of course, when you turn to the right, instinctively pull down on the yoke. So now I'm finding myself at this attitude before I'm ready to turn and stuff. And so it was a lousy approach. And finally, I got it all lined up and everything was all set. And I'm on very short final. And I says, into myself, I said, I don't want this to be my first approach. This is really lousy. So I full throttle, carb heat, full throttle, went around again. The instructor told me later on, he said, you had finally recovered. Why did you go around? I said, it's because I didn't want it to be my first landing. This a lousy one like this. And he says, okay, whatever. And so that was my flying career. And then second, but not the next flight. The next flight I took off, solo flight anyway. I took off, flew straight and level to the practice area where I was supposed to practice, turned around, flew straight back to the airport, landed, and kissed the ground when I got back. That's the first time I'd been away from the airport, all by my lonesome self. So the next flight, I'm an ace now. I'm an old cocky dude. I've got 2 full hours of flight time. Well, I'm ready to go. I soloed at 10 hours, so I probably got about 12 hours of flight time. I'm so smart, Ripley wouldn't believe it. So I fly out to the practice area, and he says practice stalls is what I was supposed to do. So there's a couple of different kinds of stalls. There's a power on, power off stall. Power on is where you're taking off and you get your nose too high and the airplane stalls. It's not stall like the engine quitting. It's just you're not getting enough airflow over the wings to maintain flight. The power off stalls when you're coming in, you're throttled back for landing and you allow the nose to get too high. Now, technically speaking, that's what you do when you land. You do a power off stall and you touch down just as you're stalling. That's what you want to do. Well, I'm practicing power on stalls because they're the easiest. When you stall warning horn goes off, you push the nose forward and you start flying again. You recover your altitude and then you go around and then you do it again, and then you do it again, you do it again. About the end of the time, about the time I'm ready to leave, I says, okay, come on, you got to at least try a power off stall. So again, I've gone from a power on setting, almost full power, just go full idle on the throttle, carb heat and idle, and pull the nose up. I pulled it up too high, too fast, and I stalled. And it started to fall. And as soon as it started to fall, immediately went full throttle, which is what you're supposed to do, carb heat, full throttle, and lower the nose. But I didn't really stall. The stall warning horn just started to blow a little bit. So I was getting close, but not close. I says, you stupid idiot. Come on now. If you're going to do a power off stall, do a power off stall. So without recovering from the first one, I pull the nose back up again, pull the power all the way back, pull the nose up again. And and I'm hanging on the prop. And I said to myself, wait a minute, this isn't how we practice. What's going on here? Luckily enough, actually, I wasn't completely hanging on the prop, but it sure felt like it. The nose fell, and down it comes. And what do? You go full throttle, and you recover the nose. Well, it's recovered already because I did a full stall, and it rolled over, and all I can see in my windscreen is green grass, just green grass everywhere. And I said, this is not right. Come on, guys. What did you do? And so the first thing I look at is my airspeed indicator. My airspeed indicator is now past the green, and it's heading in the yellow, and it's heading for the red. I says, that's not right. I got to slow this airplane down. So throttle all the way back and bring the nose up. And sure enough, and I went right straight into a power off stall.
Oh, no.
And I said to myself, that's a power off stall. Nose down, full throttle, went back, did a left-hand turn, went straight back to the base, landed, kissed the ground when I got up. Scared the pants off me. I didn't fly again for about 3 weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
Didn't tell the instructor what I'd done, but I tell you what, I learned my lesson. My dad in the back seat smacking me as hard as he could. Says, you stupid idiot. That's not how you're supposed to do that.
What's your, looking back, your career in the Navy, your time in Vietnam, what's your takeaway from all that for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I have been greatly, greatly blessed. I've had opportunities and blessings and doors open to me that just weren't available to so many other people. And I've been places, the Navy's, I got a chance to, my first deployment to the Middle East, every time we pulled into port, one of the senior petty officers of the squadron there was 3 other of us, and so it was 4 total, took us all over Japan. We went to Mount Fuji, bus, train, boat, to get to this hotel and next to Mount Fuji. It was great. Best steak in the world. Teppanyakis is okay here local, but just I can't think of the name of it here, doing a brain dump, but it's a special beef that they raise over there, and the cattle are fed and hops and they're massaged, and when this guy cooks it in front of you, he does chop it up, in smaller pieces, but when he gives it to you, you have a chopsticks and you have a fork, and that's it. No knives, because you can cut that meat with just a pair of chopsticks. And it was just so tender and so good. And Kobe
beef, yeah.
And so we hit that restaurant several times. But he took us all around. One of the curious things was that we would always, of course, go to the bars because the other 3 guys would be drinkers. And so when I went to the bar with him, I would order, I'd like a Sprite or a 7-Up, but bring me the can or bring me the bottle so that there wouldn't be any confusion of the fact that I was getting any mixed drinks or anything. Or if you really wanted to get him, he says, bring me a carton of milk. I just want a carton of milk. And all of the barmaids would think that was just the best thing ever. And so I'm getting all the barmaids' attention over here while those guys are drinking by themselves.
Just because it was so unusual?
So
is that
unusual,
what it was?
yeah.
That's
U.S.
funny.
Navy sailor guy drinking milk. Something's wrong with this picture. But it was great. So I got to see so many things. I got to go places that my older brother specifically went to the Mediterranean. He did get to go to Far East. I did not get to go didn't get to go to Australia. We had gone across the equator on the Ticonderoga, and the commanding officer of the ship basically comes out and says, "We're going to take a survey here. So, your squadron survey. Do you want to go back to Philippines, or do you want to go to Australia?" And to my thinking, Australia, Philippines. We've been to the Philippines already. Australia, Philippines. Australia, of course. Now this is going to try something new. This will be a lot of fun. And so about 2 days later, he comes back on the intercom and says, "Well, we're going to the Philippines. The Officers' Wives Club has put together, all the wives are coming to the Philippines." And so says, "Well, let them go to Australia. Come on." Anyway. So
did you rough water on the ship, on the aircraft carriers? What's that like?
That's interesting. The waves, of course, and the wind blowing the caps of the waves makes it all more dramatic, but it's the swells and the frequency of the swells. One particular time, we are being beat to death in the aircraft carrier, but when you looked out to the cruiser over there, he's just going from peak to peak of the swells. He's going fine. But there's other times when they're burying their bow in the water, and we're just smooth as silk. I think the roughest time I ever had that I can think of on top of my head is coming back from a deployment on board the Ticonderoga. And we're doing 20 to 25 knots on this bucket. This thing they got the oars out. They're going, trying to go so fast. And this thing we're blowing water off the top of the bow onto the flight deck. And when you walk through the hangar deck is made in sections. And they literally put them together. And so they overlap each other. And when the ship swells so much, these things actually come apart. And so you're standing there looking at the ship as this thing, and then standing by for the next big shudder when the bow smacks again. So yeah, that was pretty intense. But generally speaking, aircraft carriers like cruise ships are not that bad. They roll and they pitch, and the bosun's mate will come on to stand by for heavy seas, and he's got a spiel he does about bolt everything down and stuff, and you do. We had cords that strap the filing cabinet's doors so they don't fall open, stuff like that. And so it could get pretty good. When I was on board the submarine, there's nothing.
Oh, tell me about the submarine. Yeah, you were going to tell me that story.
Well, we had an exchange situation going with that submarine that was down in the southern part of the. This
is at your time in Vietnam.
Yeah, in Vietnam, and I got to be picked to go on to spend the night on board the submarine, and then the next day they'd come back.
What was the name of the submarine? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was the SS Sabalo was the name of the submarine, and there was a couple of submariners that they took back, and then we came over and helicoptered us down to the ship or the boat. I'm sorry, got to get that right for you guys. I don't want to be calling it a ship.
Is it big?
No, it wasn't big at all. It was.
Was it a diesel sub?
It was a diesel. It was an old FM-10, which is a 10-cylinder diesel engine, and it had four of them, four engines. And watching them start those engines was like a ballet. They start them by opening a couple of valves to get air pressure and the air pressure then causes the cylinders to start moving. And then when it gets up to a certain RPM, then you turn on the fuel, and then when the fuel starts flowing, then you hit the igniters and it starts up. But to get that to happen on one engine, let alone two or three of them, is like watching a ballet going.
So you spent the night on it?
Yeah, I spent the night, hot bunked, and got up the next morning. Actually, before I went to bed, they put me on the helm. So here I am on this big wheel, and I got a compass in front of me, and then there's another gauge that says how much your rudder is switched to left or right. And so the bridge is behind me and up a little bit. And so the navigation officer calls down and says helm, right rudder to course 335. And I says, Roger, right rudder 335. And so I turn it until I get the rudder swung to the right, and we start spinning. And then I learned right off the bat that at least 5 degrees before you get there, you got to go left rudder to stop the turn. It took me a while to figure that out. We were all over the ocean for a while, and I'm sure navigation was fit to be tied, trying to keep track of where we were.
Was it noisy in there?
Actually,
inside the submarine?
The submarine wasn't really noisy. Even when they had it in your engine compartment when it's running, it's noisy. But the rest of the thing, you could feel the vibrations when they were cranking the diesel. But
did that give you an appreciation for the guys you were tracking down?
Oh yeah. I had a much greater appreciation for what was going on as I was harassing them up there and stuff. And we had a couple of tactics where, for example, you mark on top of the submarine, and then when he's on the surface, and you're communicating with him and telling him what you're going to do. And then you fly out 10 miles, and then you come back around, and then you put your sonobuoys and you track him, and you finally get him to come close enough to one of your sonobuoys that you can attack him. And then you report your position. You don't actually attack him in that case. Anyway, point of the matter was that, now I know what they're doing down there, and it's a lot more interesting and stuff. So that was pretty cool. Now, what the guys did back on the ship, I don't have any idea. the big aircraft carrier compared to
those guys willing to go do a sub all the time. I don't know. That's
Well, I just got back from Groton, Connecticut, where I served a 1-year mission for the Latter-day Saint Church, and the Groton Submarine base is right there, and that's what we did, was military relations. And so we got a chance to talk to the submariners, and they commissioned the SSN Ohio and stuff, and so I got to rub shoulders with some pretty significant people. Anyway, to find out what, from their perspective, it's a whole lot different. That's how I figured out you can hear S2s go on top of you, because you can actually hear the vibration as an S2 goes over.
Wow.
S3 was same. The P3s make a lot of noise when they're going over, and you can hear a P3 too, because it's a constant RPM engine, so it's always the same sound. And so you can hear them going overhead when they're directly overhead, even underwater, certain depths anyway. You can hear.
Well, you've lived an interesting life.
Oh, I have had a great time, and like I said, I stuck around because it was so much fun.
Yeah,
and it was really a challenge, adventure. Like I said, I tell my brothers, I got to get off the ship every day. Had to come back to the ship every day, but I got off the ship every day. Got to go play games and have a good time, and then come back again. And then, and the process of doing that, ultimate video game, was to find that little bitty submarine in that great big ocean.
It's fascinating. You don't even think about that in relationship to carrier groups, that they're tracking for subs. That's really cool.
Yeah. And the guys on board the ship, it's a whole different game. Hunt for Red October. You watch that, and watch sonar. What's that ever? Up Periscope.
Yeah,
up Periscope. Yeah, so he dropped a quarter and 2 nickels and a dime on the deck of the ship. Okay, that's exaggerated perhaps, but it's kind of like that. I've heard. I've had a tape that we used to play as a training thing, where a Russian submarine actually recovered one of our sonobuoys, and you could hear them talking. You couldn't make out what they were saying because it's kind of muffled. It's just not the same kind of a microphone. But you could hear them talking, and then when they got it down, you could hear the klaxon go when they were going to go underwater again and stuff. And that was pretty cool. And then they finally got the sonobuoy in. They took the hydrophone first, and so we got to hear all those sounds. It was kind of cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Well,
thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for giving me. Like I said, my grandkids are getting tired of hearing all these. Did I ever tell you about the time of Grandpa? Not again. Anyway, so this has been really a lot of fun.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.